decrease in value. So that's a simple side of that. When we're talking about trust in the county, we're talking about the problem that we have with secrecy and the lack of transparency about the decisions that are being made pretty much without public awareness of those going on. For instance, we have one spaceport vendor who's being paid $33,000 a month. He was originally paid $5,500 a month as a retainer to help with the purchase of the property. And then about a year ago, he started getting on the first of every month $13,750, and then a second check on the 15th of every month for another $13,750, for a total of $33,000 a month. And what he does for the county is completely secret. And so whether it's ethical or unethical what he's doing, it's not transparent. And the Board of Commissioners has an obligation when they're spending our money to have complete openness. We've all heard throughout our lives that transparency is the best disinfectant. That's how we keep the DA from having to charge the director of the PSA with the millions of dollars of theft that occurred there and the misuse of funds. And so when we have transparency, by having open discussions about topics they don't want to talk about, then we're going to have the trust built based on actions. Trust is not implicit, it's earned. You want to trust people, you give everybody the benefit of the doubt. You should. But if they prove to you that they want to keep secrets from you, then they're hiding something. And from that moment on, you cannot trust them. So I promise to have transparency as my first and foremost criteria for doing business as a commissioner in Camden County. I will not sit behind a dais and refuse to talk to people who want to talk to me from the floor. And that is the current characteristic of the county commission. I will not do that.
Ms. Murray, you have the next question. How does a school board member's role and responsibility differ from the role and responsibility of the school superintendent and school administration?
Yeah, so the school board's job is to make policy, whereas far as the school superintendent, school administration handles operations on a local level. So they're deciding what actually happens in their school. The school board themselves actually makes policy countywide. And so there's a big difference between the two. And I think there's a big misunderstanding on what the school board is capable of doing and what they're not, what's inside their scope of responsibility and what's not. And so things like curriculum, things where people have strong opinions on curriculum, well, that's decided at a state level. That's not decided at a local level. And so it's important to understand the difference between the two. And so the role of, our local school board is to hold the superintendent accountable, to manage that individual. And then aside from that, it's to make policy that affect our kids and our schools, but it's not to handle operational issues that happen on school by school basis. And we've seen that lately. Recently my daughter's in the 2nd grade, and I got to go on her first field trip with her, and her entire school experience has been COVID related. So it's been a little difficult to partner in her education because we haven't been allowed to go in there. In my school, we were allowed to accompany her on her field trip. A school down the street was not. Parents were not allowed to go because that's an operational decision. And so people are enraged at the school board when it's not their call. It's actually an operational decision. So it's important to understand the difference between the two. But at the end of the day, that's the school board member's job is to handle policy, not operations.
Mr. Spears, do you want me to read the question?
No, ma'am. That's so.
Okay.
I assume ditto isn't an appropriate answer. So she's exactly right. The role of the school board is to make the policy. The role of the superintendent and the administrators is to execute the policy, and there's a big difference there. we in my day job, I see that with some regularity as well, with the Board of Commission making the decisions, and the role of us as that are directors within the county itself is to execute those decisions that are made. That is a finite difference that has to be recognized. Again, I couldn't agree more with everything Allison said. I think that's the case. We do see issues just like that, like she's discussing the things that are handled at a state level. A lot of the people I've spoken to over the last few months, of course, they bring up a lot of the social issues and the things that we see on the news regarding things that may or may not be happening in the schools, and those are state level decisions that are made as far as curriculum and things like that. I actually had the honor to have lunch with Mr. Woods, the state superintendent, on Thursday, and he was talking about exactly that. About I wanted to know from him, what are the differences really between a local school board and the state school board, and they have that responsibility for developing the curriculum and what gets in and what is not supposed to get in. So that's a different level, but locally. We're handling as a school board the policies that we can at a local level, but then there's also the schools themselves that have say in individual issues, and that's important. Issues like transgender children using bathrooms and things like that, those are decisions that are made by the school, not by the school board in generality, and that way those things can be dealt with on a real drilled down individual level. So the different levels within that structure are extremely important. I believe it's the role of the school board to make the local policy that affects the local area, and it's the role of the superintendent and the administrators to execute that policy.
Mr. Winkle, the fourth question starts with you. Do you plan to promote any changes to existing county taxes? Please explain.
The answer is yes. This goes back to the transparency question. Interestingly enough, I sit on the County Board of Equalization. And the Board of Equalization is where you would appeal your tax burden to if you feel like it has been calculated improperly. And the 3 members of the 5-member board who hear your case make a decision based on the facts about whether they believe that your taxes are correctly calculated or not. I've learned a lot being on that board. I have met people who are all citizens of Camden County who all feel like they have an argument about their property taxes. There are cases in which there are millions of dollars worth of property involved. There are cases where people have run down properties and that those properties need to be adjudicated in order to make a decision. The decision we make can be appealed, and that appeal goes through the court system to make a final determination. So what I have learned in all of this is that, yes, there are imbalances in our main source of income for the county. More than $20 million a year of our budget comes from property taxes. And I think that our tax assessor's office does a very credible job considering the problem that they have with staffing, not having enough people, not having enough frequency to look at properties, and especially during COVID and then the escape from cities that has run up property values here. I think people need to understand that we have a messy system now and that the county commission has a budget to meet. And it's going to be very, very difficult in order to be fair to the public without taking a look at treating everybody fairly in the property taxes that they take. When you're talking about East Plus, we're all paying that equally. We spend more money, we pay more. Very progressive. when you talk about property taxes, there are people who are not paying enough, and there are plenty of people who are paying too much. So we have to spend more time making sure that we get that right so we can provide enough income to the county to provide services without causing the pain that would come from an unfair tax system.
Mr. Turner, I will reread the question for the audience. Do you plan to promote any changes to existing county taxes? Please explain.
You know, I know you're an expert in that area, and I'm not, but I will tell you this. As a business owner, that multiplier effect that I told you guys about a while ago, that helps your tax situation, believe it or not. I went to the county commissioners probably 10 or 15 years ago and started lobbying them, if you can call it that, for more local participation in major jobs, renovations, and new jobs in this county, to use businesses that are here rather than businesses that are away. Every time that you go to Jacksonville and you buy a product in Jacksonville, you leave money in Jacksonville that should be sitting here, that we should be using. That's that multiplier effect. It literally says that for every dollar that I pay out, it should generate anywhere from $4 to $7. Now, there's a complicated calculation that you have to go through to get this, but it does make sense because too many contracts are going out of our county and out of our state. Vendors pay taxes in other counties and states instead of Camden County. I'm reading you this because I wrote it. Local businesses don't just pay taxes. Listen to this. When you don't use a local business, you take that money out of here. That makes your taxes have to go up. Somebody's got to pay the bills here. When local businesses don't just pay taxes, they employ citizens, they buy houses and vehicles, they purchase groceries, they patronize other local businesses, and they raise families. In other words, they spend their money at home. When I was chairman of the Chamber of Commerce, that was the one thing that we implemented, was the fact of the multiplier effect and the reality of keeping it in Camden and what it really means to our local taxes. Because they're going to get their money one way or the other. We can either give it to them or we can send it somewhere else and they can go to the homeowner. Because if I'm right, I think the homeowners actually pay most of the taxes, not the small businesses. So one other thing we got to do is we got to increase our business base. We've got to make sure that these businesses make it. 80% of small businesses fail within the first 5 years they're in business. And then 80% of the 20% that's left, they fail in the next 5 years. I'm telling you, it is very difficult to run a small business. I can promise you that. Did it. Been there. And I can wear that t-shirt, in other words. So just remember that. That's extremely important. That's the change I would make. I would focus. I would get the sheriff's department to buy